The year is 1066. King Harold Hardrada is traveling with his army up in the north of England, nearby York. King Harold Hardrada is the king of Norway, a great Viking king who had a great career, and he killed many enemies in his time. And now he is on a mission to claim all of England as his kingdom and become king of both Norway and England. King Harold and his soldiers were sitting in a field without any armor on, when all of a sudden they saw in the distance a great army approaching. King Harold Hardrada knew instantly that this was the army of Harold Godwinson, the King of England, approaching to start a fight and a great battle against King Harold Hardrada. Harold Godwinson and his army had been marching rapidly from the south of England to travel up north to meet the Viking invaders when the Vikings would be unexpecting of their arrival, so that the English army could have an advantage in the upcoming great battle that was to ensue near the Stamford Bridge, nearby of York, in the north of England. The English army, under the leadership of Harold Godwinson, started attacking over the Stamford Bridge, and one great Viking warrior who was very big and very strong, wielding a great axe, was able to stop the English army in their tracks, because on the bridge, that great Viking warrior, he is said to have killed multiple English warriors, and thereby buying Harold Hardrada's Viking army enough time to put on chainmail and put on armor and prepare to be able to fight the English Anglo-Saxon army. So that one great Viking warrior was a great savior for Harold Hardrada, a great warrior who will go into history because he killed many Anglo-Saxon soldiers on that bridge. But he was eventually killed when one of the Anglo-Saxon soldiers was able to sneak under the bridge and thrust a spear through the planks of the bridge and hitting that great Viking warrior in the body from underneath, thereby killing the great Viking warrior. That was the end of that Viking warrior, but it was a very interesting story that happened on the Stamford Bridge. Now, Harold Godwinson's Anglo-Saxon army had now been able to cross the bridge because they had killed the great Viking warrior on the bridge. Now, the Anglo-Saxons were storming headfirst towards Harold Hardrada's Viking army, who were placed up on a hill in a defensive shield wall formation. That both armies clashed into each other, swords and axes being flung around everywhere. Many warriors dying on both sides. It was a very brutal, bloody battle, with both sides not wanting to give an inch. This was the main fight in the Battle of the Stamford Bridge. This was the fight that would decide the fate of England. Would England fall into Viking hands, or would England remain under the Anglo-Saxon king Harold Godwinson? The fate of England was in the balance at this moment. King Harold Hardrada was fighting fiercely right in the thick of the battle. Surrounded by his Viking warriors, he was leading his men very well, slaying down many Anglo-Saxon soldiers with his great Dane axe. He was truly a great king, King Harold Hardrada, a great warrior, a very tall man, a very imposing figure. This was going to be the defining moment of his life, which had been filled with so much greatness for everything that he had done in his life. So here he was fighting for his life, because him and his army were surrounded now on all sides by the Anglo-Saxon army. They were pressing onto the Viking shield wall from all sides. King Harold Hardrada was outnumbered, and he knew this, but he was fighting on because he had a warrior spirit and he would never give up. Harold Hardrada was right in the middle of the fighting, cutting down many Anglo-Saxon soldiers. He was in a raging fury, berserker mode, where it was like no man could cut him down. But in that very moment, an arrow strikes Harold Hardrada's neck, killing the great Viking king and ending any hope of a Viking invasion of all of England, and in a lot of ways being described as the ending to the Viking Age, definitely the ending of the great Viking era. It was definitely over with the death of the great Viking king Harold Hardrada at Stamford Bridge. Now, with Harold Hardrada dead, the Viking army was under the leadership of Tostig Godwinson, the brother of the King of England, Harold Godwinson. So this was brother against brother. But Tostig Godwinson and his Viking army were now being cut down from all sides, surrounded by the Anglo-Saxon army. And yes, it was a great slaughter, but the Vikings fought valiantly. It is at this moment, when the Anglo-Saxons are pressing in and slaughtering the Viking army, that the leader of the Viking army, Tostig Godwinson, is cut down by an Anglo-Saxon soldier. Thereby, now the Viking army has no leader, and they are being slaughtered, every last one of them, by bloodthirsty Anglo-Saxon warriors. Just at the moment that the Anglo-Saxons think they have already won the battle, when they had slain both Hardrada and Tostig, it is at that moment that the Anglo-Saxons spot a new Viking army running towards them. That Viking force is led by the Viking nobleman Øystein Orre. He is a Viking nobleman loyal to Harold Hardrada, and he has now come to try to help his Viking friends. But what he doesn't know is that the Viking army has already been defeated. Øystein Orre's Viking army has now clashed with the Anglo-Saxons, swords and axes charging at each other. A very bloody fight ensues as the Viking army and the Anglo-Saxon army clashes. This is the final part of the battle. The part that wins this is going to be victorious in this battle. Øystein Orre is furious because of the death of his close ally Harold Hardrada and Tostig Godwinson. The Vikings are furious, but so are the Anglo-Saxons. It's a very bloody final part of the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The battling was very, very fierce as the warriors were fighting, but eventually the Anglo-Saxons, who vastly outnumbered the Viking army of Øystein Orre, eventually the Anglo-Saxons gained the upper hand and started cutting down every last one of the Vikings who were severely outnumbered. And eventually the great warrior Øystein Orre himself gets cut down by an Anglo-Saxon soldier. That marks the end of the Battle of Stamford Bridge, and the victorious side was the Anglo-Saxons under the leadership of Harold Godwinson. It was a great victory for Harold Godwinson and his Anglo-Saxon army, keeping England under Anglo-Saxon control, defeating the great Viking invading army. And this was a great thing for the English people of the time. So England would be under Anglo-Saxon control, but not for long, because later the same year, William the Conqueror would attack England, and the rest is history.